Welcome to Tech for Founders podcast. I'm your host, Panida, and today we have a very special guest, Jeremy Nagel. Jeremy is a neurodiverse indie hacker who sold his startup Smooth Messenger, and he also developed a habit stacking app called Focus Bear. He'll be sharing his unique approaches for productivity and habit building that can benefit non-technical founders. We'll be discussing his journey as a founder, challenges for non-technical founders using technology, and valuable advice for leveraging technology to improve businesses. Thank you for being on the show, Jeremy. Welcome to Tech for Founders, the podcast that helps non-technical founders leverage technology in their businesses. Follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to stay tuned for new episodes. Can you tell us more about your journey as an indie hacker and the founder of Smooth Messenger?
Yeah, sure. So I started working on Zoho products back in 2011. I had just graduated uni and I got a freelance job doing things with Zoho Creator. And it turned into a chance encounter that I started getting a lot more people wanting help with Zoho as well. So I spent the next 5 years being a Zoho consultant, and I started to realize that a lot of people were asking for the same thing, that they kept on asking me for one particular consulting project, essentially, to do a round robin for their sales team. So when a new person said, hey, I'm interested in your services, they wanted to evenly distribute it amongst the salespeople. And I had built it for about 8 different people. And I was thinking, hang on, if I keep getting consulting requests for this, maybe I should actually turn it into a product. That was really when the first indie hacking project began, where I made an app on Zoho Marketplace called Advanced Round Robin, and I started getting people essentially using that. It was a SaaS app where they paid $15 per month, and I realized I really enjoyed that. I liked being able to build something once, and if someone had an idea, I could incorporate it in, and then it helped everyone else as well. And then after that, the next thing that I noticed was a lot of people were asking for SMS capabilities within Zoho CRM. So that became Smooth Messenger. I started an integration which was really basic, and then people started using it much more than they were using the Advanced Round Robin extension. Started growing very quickly, and I had to hire a team to help me build it because I couldn't do it all myself. And it was a little bit tricky because a lot of the customers were in the United States and I'm in Australia. Made some customer support challenges, so I ended up then having to hire a customer support rep to help me. And it grew from there, grew to 500 customers. And then we ended up getting acquired by a larger SMS company in February 2022.
So it really seems like you saw user demand. So you saw that in consultancy and then you made it into a product. And I think that's just really great, because I think a lot of people, they sit there and they try to find this amazing idea and then they build it without knowing exactly what the users want. And I feel like because you did this whole consultancy thing, it really helped you have this added advantage of knowing exactly what you had to build.
Yeah, and I had learned from failure in the past that I had a lot of ideas in the past, and I'd built apps and then no one else really wanted to use it. And I started to realize that it's quite important to actually talk to people before you build an app. I'm a developer, so my tendency is to go straight to writing code, but it's far better to actually spend a bit of time interviewing people, finding out what they want, focusing more on customer development than product development.
Yes, definitely. So how did your diagnosis with ADHD and ASD impact your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, it was always there. I became aware of the ADHD last year, but it explains many things. For example, a lot of people are pretty happy to work a job and maybe have one little project on the side. I tended to have 2 or 3 jobs and 2 or 3 or 4 different side projects at the same time. I was very busy and I would get bored with one project and then start another one, but I didn't want to give up on the last project. So I'd get a team to help me. And it meant that at times I felt like I was doing it wrong, because the conventional advice is that you should focus and you should choose one particular project to focus on. And I think that is true to a certain extent, but I think it's also in some ways valuable to experiment with a lot of different projects and see which ones actually get some traction. And so in that way, my ADHD tendency was pretty helpful because I had so many different ideas and I wasn't necessarily able to execute on all of them, but I was able to make a prototype for all of them. And after putting it out into the market, I could see which one actually gets any interest, because I probably did maybe 10 different products in total before I did the round robin. And Smooth Messenger was my 11th, and now Focus Bear is my 12th. So it's the kind of thing where lots of experimentation is helpful, and that's the way my brain often works. And then with the autism side, I guess where it comes out for me, it's both a blessing in terms of being able to really get into hyper focus. That's one of the traits of ADHD as well, but I think it's pronounced with autism that I can really block out the outside world and I can focus on one thing for quite a long time. But it's also a challenge for me because one of the traits of autism is often social difficulties, and that makes it difficult for me to actually go out and talk to customers. And I think that was some of the reason why my previous projects didn't succeed that well, because I was reluctant to get feedback from other people. And it's something that I've really had to force myself to get into the habit of and train myself to get comfortable with it.
I think you definitely did very well in terms of trying so many projects, because a lot of people they mess up the first project and they think they failed, but you keep going until like the 10 12 project, which I think is just a lot of resilience required. And yeah, I think it's very cool. And yeah, and I think you're able to handle it quite well, and I admire that.
Lots of pivoting required.
Yeah. So can you please walk us through the development process of Focus Bear and how it helps people with ADHD build healthy habits?
Sure. The development process was essentially, I wanted an app for myself because I was starting to have quite bad habits of waking up in the morning and going straight to my emails, because I had all these customers in the US. And at the time that I was building Focus Bear, I was negotiating the sale of Smooth Messenger. So it was quite a stressful time for me. And I was not meditating, I was not exercising, which was not a good idea because I need those habits in order to actually be able to cope with stress. And I had a lot of stress and I was starting to move away from what was actually helping me to deal with it. The idea behind Focus Bear was to not let me check my emails until I had meditated and gone for a run. That was a very early version, and it has grown since there, but that's the fundamental premise, that the user sets up a morning routine that they want to stick to. And it's going to be different for everyone. But for me, it's going for a run first thing, doing some journaling, doing some meditation, and then only after that, checking my emails. And then the other side of it is blocking distractions. So I found that sometimes if I was feeling stressed or if I just didn't know how to do a particular task, I'd end up thinking to myself, "Ooh, I wonder what's happening in the news right now. I'll just go and check the headlines." And that's an easy way for me to lose half an hour, because I go and check the headlines and then I think, "Oh, I wonder what, I'm not sure that I completely agree with that. I'll check another news site," and I can very easily go down rabbit holes. So with Focus Bear, the other feature is that I set up which sites are blocked. And if I go to a website like that, it'll tell me, "Not right now." And by doing that, the combination of having the habits, which really set my brain and nervous system up to be able to be calm and be productive, and also blocking distractions, it has meant that I've been able to be far more productive. And the other people who use it also find it has benefits too.
Yes, definitely. I think habits have a huge impact on our lives. Like recently, I started a morning routine and it helps me be so much better. Because I mean, if you check the email right away, there's gonna be a lot of doom scrolling, because the first thing you probably see is, oh, AI is taking over, and then you're in panic mode, and then you can't work, right? So I think like what you build with Focus Bear can definitely help a lot of people.
What are your habits in your morning routine?
Well, I've been recently trying this 20-20-20 habit from the 5 a.m. club, except I don't do it at 5 a.m. I do it at 6, 6 a.m.
Okay.
club. So I do
Nice.
journaling, 20 minutes, meditating. No, wait, journaling and meditating together, and then working out, and then yeah, around that, about that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, nice. Haven't heard of the 20-20-20 principle before, because there is another 20-20-20 rule, which is every 20 minutes you should look away from your screen 20 feet away for 20 seconds. But I like the morning routine version as well. It sounds like a great way to start the day.
Thank you. And so what are some of the common challenges that non-technical founders face when incorporating technology into their business?
I wouldn't really know because I'm a technical founder, but I guess what I've seen sometimes is that if you're not technical yourself, you can't assess the quality of work that a developer is doing. And you might hire someone who they might be able to build something that works initially, but it ends up not being built in the right way. And then just as you're getting to scale, it falls apart because it was built very poorly. So it's helpful to have someone who can review the code and make sure that it's not terrible. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of strengths for a non-technical person because it means that you're biased towards talking to customers instead because you can't build it right away. And you might do prototypes using Bubble or a low code or no code tool so that you can get feedback more quickly. Whereas the technical person might think, yeah, I could do that, but I really want to make it good. So I'm going to spend 6 months building a really polished app and no one uses it. So it's a waste of time.
So maybe the best thing is to just find a technical co-founder and combine those two strengths.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I'm still on the lookout for a co-founder to help me with Focus Fair. So anyone who's passionate about mental health tech and ADHD and you're great at marketing, reach out.
Sure. So how can startups and SME utilize technology to improve their productivity and efficiency?
It's probably dependent on the industry, but I guess there's ways of looking at where is the time going, doing a time and motion study and thinking about, are we doing things in a repetitive manner that could be automated? And there might be ways using Zapier and potentially, if you're brave, using ChatGPT to automate some things. But I think it's hard to give a general principle besides automate as much as you can and free up people to do creative work rather than asking them to copy and paste information from one spreadsheet to another.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just a lot of tasks that we shouldn't be doing. Even as a podcaster, I think it gets quite repetitive.
Yeah. Do you use a tool to like Descript to do your podcast editing?
I'm still figuring out how to incorporate technology into this process as well. So can you share any unique approaches or strategies that you have developed for productivity and habit building?
One that I don't think many people try is micro workouts. The idea is that while you're working throughout the day, there's a tendency to stay fixed at your desk and not really move. And what I find for me personally is that by the afternoon, I'm zonked. I'm very, very tired and I'm not really capable of creative thinking. But I find that if I do short bursts of activity throughout the day, which I call micro workouts, and that might involve, say, every 40 minutes, I'll stand up. And if I'm in the office, I'll just do some stretches. Normally, I don't go to the office, though. I work from home and I can be a bit more adventurous and I can do a set of push-ups or pull-ups, activities that are going to get the blood flowing for me. And I find that that means that my mood is better, my ability to concentrate is better, and critical thinking and creativity are more long-lasting throughout the day. That's my number one productivity tip.
It's a very good one. I'll be sure to try it out. So how do you think founders can ensure that technology they incorporate aligns with their business goals and values?
Hmm. It's interesting to think about that in the context of privacy and security, because there are some technologies that make a lot of promises about, say, getting more leads or closing more sales, and they might actually be compromising people's privacy. And especially, I was talking to a lawyer this morning about the changes in legislation in the US around health data, that if you're building an app like Focus Bear, where you might be collecting information about users. For example, people sometimes will put in how much they slept or what their insulin levels were into Focus Bear. And there have been some apps in the past that have tried to monetize that data by selling it to advertisers or selling it to insurance companies and trying to sell services to the people based on the data that they've collected. And that's now in some states in the US illegal. And I think it's generally probably not that morally acceptable to do. I think we need to think about what is a business model that is going to be appropriate, that's going to support people's privacy while still giving them a good experience. And it doesn't necessarily mean you give it for free. It might mean that instead of it being free and ad supported, that you don't go down that business model, because that may be a bit risky, and instead better to charge your users, not necessarily a huge amount if it's not providing a huge amount of value, but charge them enough to cover the costs and make some profit. And that way you don't have these perverse incentives to do things that are going to be bad for your users.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Because I think it's not even about your own business goals and values, but user trust is so important. If one day someone treats that all their health data is being sold to this company, it's kind of over as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd get fines and you'd lose your reputation.
So, in your experience, what are some of the most important factors to consider when selecting technology solutions for a business?
The number one is probably ease of use, I reckon, because you can have whiz-bang technology, but if none of your staff want to use it, then it's a waste of time. And that is often the challenge, say, with the Zoho suite, which is CRM and bookkeeping software and pretty much any app that a business would need. The challenge can sometimes be that it becomes overly complicated, and then people don't want to actually use the CRM and they go back to just writing things on bits of paper or using a spreadsheet. So it needs to be built in a way that is going to be intuitive to the team so that it's not sucking up their time. You were talking before about how can we make it so that technology is a productivity enhancer. And I think one of the key things is that it shouldn't involve double entry, that it should be really simple for people to use. And if they can't figure it out without needing a 12-hour training session, then it's probably not the right set of software.
Definitely, because I think user experience is the most important thing, especially in businesses, because not everyone is going to be technical, and you have to understand that as a developer.
For sure.
So, how do you think founders can measure the success of their technology implementation and ensure that it is providing tangible benefits?
There's a number of metrics that I think are useful. The one that's probably the most relevant here is the stickiness ratio, which is the ratio of daily active users to monthly active users. So if the stickiness ratio is, say, 0.3, which would mean that people don't use it that often, then either maybe they don't need to use it that often. But if it's an app that's meant to be used every day, say, for example, with Focus Bear, we're really striving for it to be used every day because people are meant to do their habits every day. Maybe they might take a break over the weekend, but our stickiness ratio should be really high if it's working well. And if it's not high, then it means there's a problem with the app, that it's not engaging people, that it's not actually fulfilling the promises that it has. And there are other ways as well, that if it's an app, for example, that is a CRM system and the goal is to help businesses to close more sales, then you might be able to measure that directly and see what is the closing ratio, how many leads are being converted into deals, and how many deals are being marked as closed. There might be a way that you can actually measure the user's success, and you can also use that to help when you're selling the software and say, hey, people have a really high close ratio, or people end up getting their documents signed at a higher rate. If you can find a metric that is a signifier of the user's success, that's really helpful in terms of improving the product, but also being able to market and sell the product too.
Definitely. Yeah, I think numbers really help a lot in terms of measuring and like percentages. Yeah. And so finally, what advice would you give to non-technical founders who are looking to leverage technology in their businesses?
So that this isn't about them building a technical product. This is more, maybe they've got a product as well, and they're looking to make their internal processes more efficient. I think it's probably similar to the advice for business owners in general, in terms of making sure that the software is actually going to be adopted by their team, and looking at ways that it can be used potentially for multiple purposes. One thing to consider is that it's quite easy to end up with lots and lots of different subscriptions, that you can have, say, 10 different apps that are trying to help your internal processes, and that ends up being expensive, and then it's hard to coordinate them. So I guess the ideal scenario would be that you'd only have a few apps that would be doing most of the heavy lifting. And that means that it's less expensive and also less cognitive load for the team, that you've got it in a few places rather than scattered all over the place.
Definitely. So being able to select the software that would actually help the team and reducing that to just a few. Good advice. So do you have anything else you want to share?
Yeah, the final thing I would share is that there's a lot of hype right now about AI, and I think the hype is justified in some cases, but we need to be careful too that, say, if you're using a tool, if you're using ChatGPT, for example, make sure you don't put confidential information in there. That it's very powerful, but we need to use it responsibly as well, and make sure that we're not inadvertently leaking customer data when we're using ChatGPT, and that we're not giving OpenAI our internal secrets. That can be really, really helpful. I think it's one of the productivity superpowers, in terms of a tool that's very easy to use because you use natural language, and it can do a lot of things. Just careful what you put in it.
I completely agree, because when I was sending it to my team at work, I was like, don't put in any confidential data, okay? No passwords in here. This can't happen. Because I think a lot of people, it's so good for productivity that they just input everything. They're just like, you guys do this for me, write this email for me. But sometimes when you have like names and stuff, you should be leaving that out.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you very much for coming today.
No problems. It was a pleasure.